Let me ask you a question. Do you feel hopeful for the future? I mean, like when you think about humanity, do you think that tomorrow will be better than today? Well, for some reason, a lot of young people don't. According to the Walton Family Foundation, Gen Z is nearly twice as likely as previous generations of Americans to battle feelings of depression and hopelessness. And even more alarming, they're 3 times more likely to say their challenges are so severe they thought they might be better off dead. And so that begs the question, why is Gen Z so hopeless? And more importantly, what can we do about it? Well, after doing some research into generational psychology and philosophy, those are the questions I'm going to attempt to answer in this video. And I want to do so in 3 parts. First, the problem, how we got here, and data that shows us what is actually happening. And surprisingly, it's not because Gen Z is more open about their mental health. Next, the causes, 3 reasons why this is happening. And lastly, a possible solution that combines the best of Western philosophy and Eastern wisdom. So buckle up, get ready, and let's address the problem. When it comes to generational trends, Dr. Twenge is the go-to expert.
I research generational differences.
She's the author of 7 books and more than 180 scientific publications about generational differences and social psychology. So today, I'll be leaning heavily on her work. That being said though, her work is an iceberg. So if you want to learn more, I've left all of my sources in the description below. Anyways, let's look at some graphs.
And the data coming out around 2012, 2013, there started to be some odd trends. More and more teens saying that they felt lonely, that they felt left out, that they felt like they couldn't do anything right, that they didn't enjoy life. Clinical level depression among 12 to 17-year-olds doubled. Self-harm admissions quadrupled. The suicide rate doubled. So we're talking about changes that are very large that happen over a very brief period of time.
Clearly something went wrong with Gen Z, and specifically around 2012. If you look at each of the graphs that I've shown you, you can see that the staggering increases don't start beginning until that year.
So of course that begs the question, why? Why did it happen at this particular time? What was going on in teens' lives that might explain this?
Well, it has to be something massive, like a specific event. Something similar in scope to the Great Depression or the Cold War. All right, what was happening around 2012?
I volunteer!
Justin Bieber and Selena Gomez.
Well, there was the 2008 recession.
43%.
Completely wiped out. This could be the most serious recession in decades.
But at that point, the economy was already recovering.
Unemployment was actually going down over this time that teen depression was going up.
And of course, COVID was massive too, but that wouldn't hit us until 8 years later.
And it was hard to think of an event that happened at that time, reverberated across the decade. It was really a mystery to me and everybody else.
So what could it be? Well, there is one generation-defining thing, and you're probably using it right now.
And we are calling it iPhone. Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone. And here it is.
In the year 2012, smartphone ownership in the US crossed a critical threshold of 50%. This was the fastest adoption of any technology in human history, and Dr. Twenge argues that this is the most likely cause behind Gen Z's mental health issues.
It's difficult to identify any other big social change that happened around 2011 or 2012 that might be linked to mental health other than smartphones.
And she bases her argument off of 4 pieces of evidence. 1, the timing lines up perfectly.
Here's teen depression, smartphone ownership, number of hours per day that teens spend online.
Now, of course, correlation isn't causation, but this does help rule out other factors such as the economy, anxiety over school shootings, environmental concerns, the 2016 election. This helps to rule those out. Number 2, it's impacted day-to-day life like crazy.
Teens started spending a lot more time online and a lot less time with each other face-to-face and a lot less time sleeping. And that is a terrible formula for mental health.
3, smartphone ownership affects everyone, whether or not you participate in it.
Social media is social. It doesn't just affect the people who use it, it affects the people who don't use it. Because then if you're not on it, you're left out.
And lastly, number 4, the disproportionate impact on girls.
Meta's internal research found that, especially for teen girls, many of them trace their body image issues to spending a lot of time on Instagram.
And it is particularly toxic for girls. I mean, think about Instagram. Instagram at base is a platform where primarily girls and young women post pictures of themselves and ask other people to comment.
Jesus, brutal.
But I want to go a step further. You see, I believe that smartphones were just the beginning. Their adoption in 2012 was just a catalyst, but it is no longer the persistent cause these days. I believe that it was just a gateway into a whole new reality, a hyper-reality, that when compounded with the other factors that I'm going to talk about, feels pretty damn meaningless.
Coming to bed, honey?
Yes, dear.
You and I are beings, and for most of human history, we lived in this jar. Now, this jar was made up of core beliefs, or metanarratives. And while this can definitely restricted our freedom, it also kept us together. And this is known as pre-modernism.
I sure do love hanging out with my good friends. God, community, and truth. You guys are the best. No modernism, you're the best.
But the world that we live in today has opened that jar, dumped all the beans out onto a table, and thrown the jar away. Now, without those pesky, restrictive meta-narratives of the past, you're free to be whatever kind of being you want to be. Without religion telling you who to be, you're free to choose whatever spiritual path is true for you. Without traditional gender roles telling you how to behave and who to be, you're free to be whoever you want. This is postmodernism.
Hey guys, what's up? Oh, hey postmodernism!
And it's definitely had its benefits, don't get me wrong. The society that we live in these days is way more diverse, egalitarian, and individualistic. However, there's a big drawback.
Why did you kill God? God's not real, idiot. Use your brain, loser. Why would you kill community? Groupthink is bad, idiots. Think for yourself for a change. All you've done is take from me. You've destroyed the foundation of what's given me purpose and happiness and given me nothing in return. Huh, I guess you're right.
You see, there's a bunch of beans on a table, and while they're definitely free from the jar, they're also separate from one another. They're disconnected. And also, not to mention, it's incredibly messy. I'm gonna have a fun time cleaning this up. You see, we tend to think of freedom as this overriding, unquestionable good thing, but let's also not forget that freedom is also chaos. And too much freedom without any order to contain it can easily lead to a sea of meaningless uncertainty and alienation. And when it comes to freedom, Gen Z is arguably the most free generation in history. We have all of the options in the world when it comes to careers, who to be, what to believe, but this has also led us to being the loneliest.
I'm just so lonely all the time.
And most confused.
So like, what's the point of all this shit if you're just gonna fucking go on the ground? There's no point to this shit, man.
And this is what the philosopher Albert Camus called the absurd. The conflict between the human tendency to seek inherent value and meaning in life and the human inability to find any. Now, as for whether or not we should get back in the jar, I'll talk about that more at the end, but as of right now, without that jar, we're just a bunch of lonely beings. We live in a society.
We're living in a society!
And in order to keep that society from collapsing into anarchy, we each agree to a set of implicit social contracts, whether or not we're aware of them. For example, money is real and has value. If you steal, then you go to jail. Or for my male audience.
This one's a no-brainer. I'd definitely go all the way to the right. You want to space yourself as much as you can. Here, I'd probably go to the same thing, because anything else and you're kind of too close to people.
And for previous generations, specifically American baby boomers, their overarching social contract was known as
the American Dream.
And the American Dream promised that if you work hard at a safe job, then you will be able to afford a comfortable life full of consumer goods and white picket fences. And back in those days, the American Dream was true for most white Americans. But times have changed. Is it still true these days? Well, let me tell you the story of the family company, IBM. Once upon a time, IBM was considered, quote, a family company. And in this giant tech utopia, young graduates were hired straight out of college and promised a job for life with generous benefits, healthcare, and secure retirement plans.
According to this handbook, in over 40 years, full-time employees haven't been touched by layoffs. People are a treasured resource and are treated like one.
However, in the 80s and 90s, the tech landscape began to shift, and IBM fell into turbulent financial waters.
In 1993, the company of 300,000 posted an $8 billion loss.
In order to stay afloat, They had to transform, and so the once unthinkable occurred.
IBM, in practically one swift motion, cut 60,000 employees, the largest layoff in American history.
James Gallo found out it was his turn to go at IBM in Essex Junction after 27 years.
Did they give you any warning that it could be you know what you'd try?
Absolutely not.
It feels like a termination without cause.
This process felt like a betrayal.
Now let me tell y'all, this isn't a lone incident. You see, prior to the 70s, massive layoffs like this were considered unthinkable and were considered just poor management. But nowadays,
it's strictly business.
Gen Z knows that companies don't actually care about us. We know this because we grew up watching people in supposedly safe jobs like IBM get laid off at a moment's notice, first in the 2008 recession, and then again in 2020. And furthermore, as we continue to move towards automation and AI, we know that we're going to be inevitably replaced. Now, this isn't because companies are evil. It's simply economics. The system that we're in rewards this kind of short-term transactional behavior. And so in return, employees are more short-term and transactional with their employers. So that's how we end up with things like this.
Right now, the phrase quiet quitting is exploding on social media.
Yeah, I actually don't dream of labor.
I don't want to work. I don't have a dream job. I don't dream of labor.
Looking at these trends, though, I began to wonder, is this just an American phenomenon?
There is an undercurrent of dissatisfaction brewing among the young in China. A new phenomenon called bailan, meaning let it rot. It was seen as the spiritual successor of an earlier movement known as tanping, or lying flat.
In order to understand this phenomenon better, I decided to talk to my friend Rachel. What does tanping mean?
Tanping, the direct translation for this word means like you're lying down, like you're lying flat. It just simply means like I'm not gonna get myself involved in unnecessary competitions. I'm just gonna do what I'm paid for and not beyond that.
On the broader level, what is it a response to?
In China, the work culture is all about competition. At school, we have examinations, and that's like the standard measurement for everyone to show their abilities. People are going to compete amongst themselves, to see like, who gets the highest score in this test, That's a culture that led to Tangping.
However, more recently, Tangping has given rise to a more extreme form of disengagement. As youth unemployment hit a record high of 20.8% in May 2023, we started to hear whispers of a new phenomenon. So what does bailan mean?
So bailan means letting it rot, like letting yourself rot. It's kind of similar to Tangping, where it's caused by overcompetition and they want to exclude themselves from unnecessary competitive situations like this.
Now, while Tangping and bailan are different phrases, they both encapsulate a similar attitude.
Just give up. You cannot control anything. Even if you work hard, you may not have a better life and better future.
And so when we zoom out and look at the bigger picture, we can see that a significant number of young people around the world are dissatisfied with how we work. They want better, but also feel powerless to change it. Which leads us to reason number 3. For most of humanity's history, we lived localized lives. We rarely traveled beyond regional boundaries, if ever past our own village, and so the average person back then likely knew a few hundred people at most. Fast forward to today, and apparently your grandma is friends with over 1,000 people on Facebook.
It's a hot girl summer right now.
The internet has made the world bigger, and as the world gets bigger, competition increases. And as competition increases, only the extremes stand out.
Behind me are the most expensive cars in the world.
Pint-sized painter taking the art world by storm.
The world's youngest billionaire, Mumfa Jr.
Every day, all we see are the best of the best, the worst of the worst, the craziest and most extreme versions of reality. And so it's no wonder why our perception of normal is just completely warped. For some reason, we think that if we're not famous or a millionaire by 25, then we've somehow failed. What? Furthermore though, the internet reveals an interesting paradox that I've never really thought about before. In her book, Gen Z Explained, Roberta Katz writes, the experience of Gen Zers is often paradoxical, even contradictory. They have more voice than ever before. For example, a meme or a video can reach millions, but they also have a sense of diminished agency in real life. Institutions and political and economic systems seem locked, inaccessible to them, and wrong-headed. Simply put, Gen Z is louder, but has less power. And this is most evident with social media activism.
Your voice matters, whether you're typing it, whether you're speaking it, whether you're reposting it.
We're often told to use our social media platforms to spread awareness.
Use your platform.
Use your platform.
Use your platform, however big it is.
And while this has definitely made a positive difference to many worthy causes, it has also exposed us to a constant barrage of problems that are often way beyond our control.
It killed at least 128 people and injured dozens more.
The bombing over Gaza,
potentially devastating war in Ukraine.
22 people are dead.
I'll be honest, when I hear about like a war or a tragedy or environmental disaster happening halfway across the world, I don't know what to do except feel horrible. Like beyond donating and voting, what can I actually do about that? And so I hate to admit it, but I don't know what to do except just numb myself into not caring, which goes so counter to who I am as a person when I hear about all the bad shit that happens, especially right now. This is known as learned helplessness, a state that arises when individuals repeatedly face uncontrollable challenges, leading them to feel powerless and unmotivated to change their circumstances. Good news is, there's a way out of it. Okay, first, let me preface this by saying that this is just what works for me. I don't have clinical level depression and I don't have a sick family member. And so if that's the battle that you're facing, I hope that you get all the support that you need. Otherwise, let's talk philosophy. While modern life has definitely amplified the world's craziness, the problems that we face aren't exactly new. When it comes to feeling powerless or finding meaning, the oldest questions often have the oldest answers. So let's go back to 100 CE. There was once a Greek philosopher named Epictetus, and he had a handbook. And in that book he wrote, "Happiness and freedom begin with a clear understanding of one principle. Some things are within our control, and some things are not." Unless you're the president, you and I have such little control over the external world. We're powerless, we're tiny, and in the face of wars and economic uncertainty, it can all feel so overwhelming and hopeless, and you're absolutely justified to feel that way. However, there are a lot of things that we can control. For example, our physical fitness, our phone usage, how we show up in our relationships, our commitment to growth. All of these are areas where we can take responsibility. And like Sisyphus pushing a boulder up a hill, we can choose to change the things that we can, and in doing so, create meaning. Now, as for the rest, bad things will still happen. Wars will still be waged. The economy is entirely out of your control. Struggle is just an inevitable fact of life, and no amount of focusing on what we can control will make that go away. However, it stands to reason then that if we have no control over something, then that also means that worrying about it does nothing. It does nothing except cause us unnecessary, wasted suffering. And this is what Eastern wisdom teaches us to let go of. Pain is breaking your leg. That will always hurt. On the other hand though, suffering is saying, I shouldn't have broken my leg, I'm so stupid for breaking my leg, the world is conspiring against me and everything is going to hell because I broke my leg. Resisting pain, rejecting struggle, and wishing that reality were different, that's what causes suffering. And I'm not saying anything new here, this is like the most ancient of ancient Buddhist wisdom. Desire is a contract that you make with yourself to be unhappy until you get what you want. Now, this isn't to say that we should deny and suppress how we feel. No, not at all. I think it's about picking up those desires intentionally. Instead of wishing for a million things, maybe pick one thing that's worth suffering over. For example, if it's a fight that gives your life more meaning than it does pain, or is just of personal importance to you, then only you can decide that. At the end of the day, life is totally absurd, and overthinking just makes it worse. So be here now. Or in more Gen Z terms, touch grass. I'm out here at a lake, y'all. Nature is honestly the thing that really helps me feel grounded, and I think living in a city can be so overwhelming sometimes. So when I'm back out here, it just reminds me to be present. And I hope you guys can share that as well. You and I are sharing this moment across time and space. We are here right now. Life can be so beautiful if we see everything as if for the first time. Again, the way that light reflects off the water, the mountains in the distance, perhaps even the walls of your room. Life can be so beautiful if we're fully here now. Now, I'm not saying that if you just stop thinking about your problems, they're going to magically disappear. Far from it. These issues that we face are real and actually do require our full attention. Still, I believe that our best chance of creating lasting positive change in the world is to first create lasting positive change within ourselves. Now, as for whether or not creating lasting positive change even matters if humanity is doomed in 1,000,000 years, well, infinite time makes everything meaningless. The fact that something will end is not a case to say that it does not have meaning, because things have meaning while they are here, now. So be here, now.